Hello everyone, it is Jazz here. So I'm just going to do a huge bulk review of some of the manga that I read in April and May and just chat about all the reviews and ratings and things on the fabulous manga that I completed. There's a lot of good ones. There's some that are just meh. So yeah, let's jump into this massive manga chat. We're going to call it the massive manga chat. I'm going to go ahead and just start with the manga that I probably didn't give the highest rating to. Death Note, the Black Edition Volume 1, which I believe collected 2 volumes of the manga Death Note. So Death Note is about a young man named Light. He finds this thing called a Death Note. A Death Note is a notebook that is given to like these death gods, and they basically can write a name in this notebook and that person will die. Light decides to take this book that he just found, that's a Death Note, and try to basically get rid of all the bad people in the world that are in prison and whatnot. And I guess his general goal is to try to start a utopian society based on doing this act, and it doesn't go quite as planned. So there were like 3 or 4 things that I definitely didn't like about it. The main thing was that I didn't find that the characters were particularly well developed. And because it is a story that does focus for the most part on a character that is for sure very morally gray, he's kind of justifying murder, not just of criminals, but as it goes on, obviously that escalates into something more. So I felt like, in particular with Light, that for somebody that's doing that, there wasn't a lot of reasoning for why he was doing it. I'm not saying that like every sociopathic type character has to have a reason, like some people are just like that, but I felt like the story would have benefited from him having some sort of motivation or some sort of obvious trigger that was like an emotional trigger, not just a trigger that was him finding this book. Like, he's literally just triggered to do this because he's bored, and it says that in the summary. I think all the characters could have used a little oomph in their character development. There's a detective character that is like this, you know, he's kind of like the Sherlock Holmes of the piece, and I felt like he could have used a lot of development, since he's basically like the thing that Light is up against for the most part. I think there's definitely some police officer characters and you know, the death god type of character that could have used just a little bit something. I just wanted more from them. Had issues with the world building to a certain extent. The idea of the Death Note book is that if you don't specifically say how somebody's going to die, they just die of a heart attack. So it didn't make sense to me that the police didn't initially think that these deaths of criminals was some sort of disease, or that was never like put across as like a possible thing that they would investigate first before they jump to the idea that these people are being killed. Because that's like my natural inclination, and I don't think there was anything that was discussed where we thought it was anything other than there's a killer out there killing people. But I'm like, how would they know that if they don't know about the Death Note? They're obviously not going to know who Light is, but I don't know. I just had questions about how that particular world building element was executed. I saw in comments that a lot of people that gave it like a 4 or 5 star rating thought that it was darkly funny, which I'm usually down for, but I don't know. For some reason, I didn't find this funny at all. I think some of the dialogue that's between Light and the death god type character, I think some of that was supposed to be humorous. It didn't hit the mark for me. So I think that was another thing that made me like, it's just alright. I did feel like that there were some weirdly sexist moments in the book. Usually I don't let that stuff bother me, but there was something about the way it was executed in the book and the reasoning for why it was executed in it that bothered me a little bit. All that being said, there are some things that I did think that were really well done in this book. I do think plot-wise, it's really entertaining. Like, it's still a fast read. It still propels. I think it is a mainly plot-driven sort of story. I'm more of a character-driven story type of person, but I can still appreciate things that are plot-driven. I do think it does that well. In terms also of plot, the cat and mouse sort of chase between the detective and Light is really well done. I think that it's part of the like great intrigue of the story, and it is the thing that I found myself most invested in, and so bomb on that count. I also really liked the art in Death Note. I think it's very clear what's going on, which sometimes in black and white things can get a little muddled. So I did really appreciate the artistic style, and it was kind of different than some of the other manga styles that I've seen, so yay on that as well. So in the end, I decided to give this a 3-star rating. I don't think I'm going to pick up any more Death Note because I mean, I just don't like it as much as of the other mangas that I'm currently in the middle of or invested in reading. But it's not a bad read, and I can kind of see why some people enjoy it. Next up, let's chat about the Volume 2 omnibus of the manga Hot Gimmick. It's about these teenagers that are living in an apartment complex, and all the people that live in this apartment complex are basically people that work at this one particular company. And there is definitely like a hierarchy about how living in this situation is, and there's a lot of like interpersonal intrigue just because of the living situation. But it focuses on the main character, which is a teenage young woman who goes to one day in the first volume buy a pregnancy test for her younger sister, and there's a young man who has been her like bully since childhood that is the son of her dad's boss, and he basically threatens to get her in trouble if she doesn't like basically let herself be blackmailed by him. It's yeah, when they say these Tokyo boys and girls are messed up, they are messed up. If you watched my initial review of the first volume of Hot Gimmick, you know that I was supremely conflicted by it. And I would say that while that feeling has eased by reading the second volume, I still feel like I can classify this as a guilty pleasure, because usually I don't believe in that sort of thing. I think you like what you like and you shouldn't feel guilty about it. But for some reason with this, I guess because it's not like the normal thing that I would enjoy, I find myself going, I really like this, but I also feel guilty about it. I did relax a little bit more with the second volume for 2 reasons. First of all, pretty much for the majority of the first volume, I did feel uncomfortable with some of the content, mostly because I wasn't sure if it was really age appropriate for the audience that I think this is geared to, which is like teenage girls. I think older teenage girls maybe could read Hot Gimmick, but I would feel extremely uncomfortable with like anybody like under the age of 15 reading that first volume of it. And I also was, you know, unable to relax a little bit during the first volume because I did feel like for the most of the first volume that the main character was going to be sexually assaulted, which, you know, makes you feel unrelaxed. Whereas in the second volume, like all that stuff was not a part of it. So I could relax more into the story and the characters, and also it is a more humorous, I think, volume than the first volume. As I said with the first volume, which I think continues into the second volume, I do really appreciate the excellent character development that this does, and also the fact that it's a story that really does study an element of teenage life that isn't often explored, and I really appreciate that, even if it can get a little on the darker side. I think that's like the main reason why I find myself liking it, even though I don't usually get into like a lot of teen drama things. I think that it's a genre that I can get into if the characters are people that I can really get invested in, or the situation is something that I can get invested in. And I definitely am invested in this. Like, for sure, I need to know what's happening. Like, I always feel like these are a page turner. The first volume was a page turner. The second one, I was like, what's gonna happen? I also love the art style of this manga. I really love how all the characters are drawn, and how all the backdrops of the city of Tokyo are drawn, and all those things like that. This omnibus, it has these like color things for the chapters that I live for. And it sounds weird, but I want everything I ever read to be printed on whatever paper they print this on, because it is like the softest, most wonderful thing in the world, and I love it. And I honestly would flip through this manga solely for the paper. I don't think it's something that can fully be my favorite, just because I do often feel conflicted about the story and the content and what it's saying to young women, which as a story, so investing, but like the way that the main character is approached by male characters, I understand why she's conflicted, but sometimes I want to shake her, because you want her, I just want more for her than she allows herself. I mean, there's something to be said for forgiveness in certain cases, but the boys in this book, some of them, not all of them, but some of them don't, I'm like, don't forgive them, girl. Like, that concerns me a little bit, like her thought process. So that's where I become like conflicted in terms of this book, on like the male and female dynamic that goes on here, and here is a little concerning. It might change as the story develops, so I definitely want to read it more, because I am invested in the characters and what's going on, and see if that's an element for that main character that does change. As like an investing story plot thing, I know I've said investing like 50 times, I will give this book 4 stars, because I do think the characters and the plot are so page-turning and interesting to me. So even though I still feel like it's a guilty pleasure, it's still something that I will sign up for again and again, until like something, unless something changes in it that I really go, ugh. Prepare yourself, because you're about to hear me gush some more about some more of Fruits Basket. So I ended up reading 16 through 19 in terms of volumes of Fruits Basket. Basically, it's the story of a teenage girl named Chiharu who ends up staying with a family called the Soma family, and they have an extremely interesting curse put upon them that is sort of supposed to be a secret, but obviously Chiharu learns about it in like, you know, volume 1. As with other times that I've reviewed this since like the first few volumes of this is just gonna be a super gush about Fruits Basket. I love it. It gives my heart joy. Fruits Basket has this amazing way of blending genres, but also blending like all the emotions into like one big ball of feelings. It's the epitome of something giving you the feels. Like it simultaneously cracks you up and rips your heart out at once. Now, I will say that I believe the most emo one of this was probably 16, which I found really intriguing, because it is definitely an interesting backstory sort of piece. It is a story that focuses, for the most part, on the backstory of Chiharu's mother, which I really found interesting, because this is a character. This I don't think is really a spoiler because it's in the first volume, but it's her mother is a character that has passed away previous to the book starting. So I think it's really interesting how this character is still such a part of the story, even though she's no longer living. As for the other volumes, They kind of followed sort of the similar topic that is kind of going through the end of this story, which is they're trying to figure out how to break the curse on the Soma family, while there are, of course, like events at school going on. There are some new sort of relationships going on in these other 3 volumes, which I'm finding very intriguing. I think I only have 4 more volumes of this, so I'm really intrigued to see how things progress as the story sort of winds up. But these 3 really are ones that I really saw like things sort of trying to build to some sort of like conclusion in terms of relationships and also like the overarching plot. I gave volumes 16, 18, and 19 all 5 stars. The only reason I gave 17 a 4.5 star rating was because even though I loved the general plot of this one, and I'm always invested in the characters, I have a deep, unabiding love for them, I will say something about 17, the way the panels and some of the art was blocked out wasn't working for me, and I ended up having like reread pages over and over again to like get what was happening, and sometimes I still feel like I missed stuff. Maybe that won't be a factor upon a reread, because I definitely will probably end up rereading this manga series after I finished it. The last 2 mangas that I'm going to talk about today are volumes 2 and 3 of Sailor Moon. I think most people know what Sailor Moon is about, so I'm just going to jump into my thoughts. I honestly wish that I had read the manga of Sailor Moon sooner, because I do enjoy the mangas, or at least so far I've enjoyed the manga series so much more than any of the anime series of it that I've watched, or what I've watched of them. Not to say that I don't have a lot of nostalgia and enjoyment in sometimes picking Sailor Moon anime back up, but the mangas are just a whole different beast that I just frankly enjoy quite a bit more. The mangas are just so much more action oriented. It talks about all the stuff that I care about in terms of Sailor Moon, which is all the stuff about them being like these crazy Sailor Scouts, which is the part that I like am really invested in, as opposed to like some of their like human activities, which are fun sometimes, but not as fun as like fighting great evil. That's like the best fun, am I right? So I just really like how focused they are, and I actually prefer a lot of the plot points in terms of the story, and I think that I just in general like the characters more. These were so action-packed and fabulously cliffhangery in terms of the way like the like villain and the new villain was set up, that I am so excited to read more of Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon. I would recommend it if you sort of like girl powery sort of stories with a little bit of romance thrown in. And I gave both of these 5 stars. I'm not still sure how much of that is just that I purely enjoyed it. I don't know that all of it was based on the actual structure of them, because there are some moments that are just like super dramatic, or like a little on the melodrama side, but I enjoy that if it's executed in a certain way. So I think I still would give these a solid, like, enjoyable 5-star rating. That was my mass manga review. Let me know if you've read any of these, if you also enjoyed them or had some different experiences with them, and also share this video if you want to share it with your friends that also really enjoy reading manga or graphic novels. If you feel like it, you can leave me some manga recommendations below, and I might see if I can check out some new series since I'm coming to the end of Fruits Basket. So do that if you feel like it. And that is it for today, my fabulous peeps. I will see you all soon. Bye!